genesis of today's video is I wanted to talk about 5 authors I'm really excited to read. 5 authors that I have expectations that I think they're going to be favorite authors of mine. Then I thought about it, and I thought to ask myself the question, why? Why do we have certain expectations on certain books or certain authors? And I thought it'd be good to start the video and talk about that a little bit. Several years ago, I was watching a very big booktuber talk during one of his reviews about how he tries to go into every book kind of even keel, not having high expectations or low expectations. And I said, that's a fantastic approach, and I don't think I can do it. For me, I do have expectations going into a book. For instance, if a friend of mine that knows my reading tastes raves about a book and loves a book and says, I know that you will love this book, how can I not go into that book with the highest of expectations? Or if, as a booktube consumer, I watch a lot of reviews about a certain book or an author and I see universal praise, how can I not have high expectations? Or even one step further, there are certain reviewers that you will connect with. You will agree with a lot of their favorite books. You may share a lot of their favorite books. So their reviews may hold a little bit more weight. Or on the other side of that, there are reviewers, the ones that I kind of aspire to be, the ones that can just perfectly coalesce plot, setting, characters, theme, and writing style into a coherent, spoiler-free manner and give you the gist of what it's like to read a book. And when those certain reviewers tell me what that book is all about and I'm excited about the book, how could I not go in with the highest of expectations? So these are 5 authors that I do go in with high expectations. I would love, of course I want to talk about these 5 authors because I haven't read them yet and I'm excited to do so, but I would love your thoughts on just that short topic about your expectations going into a book. Because for me, I can't divorce that enthusiasm, especially for these high-level reads, at least the books that I hope are going to be high-level reads for me. So drop me a comment below. Let me know what your thoughts on expectations of books, how you are able to maybe temper those a little bit, because I'm unable to do so. But let's talk about the 5 authors that I think I'm going to love. The first author is Christopher Ruocchio. So Christopher Ruocchio, if you don't know, is a science fiction author, and his Sun Eater series, this is the first book, Empire of Silence, has almost universal love, and it's a book series that is almost done. I think the 6th book is about to come out and the 7th book will be out sometime next year. So it's perfect timing for me and maybe others to jump in and start reading this series. I first heard about Ruocchio through Mike's book reviews. He's been screaming Ruocchio's name to the tops of BookTube for years at this point. And what I like when I hear him talk about it are 2 things that make me think that I'm really going to love the Sun Eater series. The first is the blending of science fiction and fantasy elements, which I really enjoy that when it's done very well, like Dune. So that's something that appeals to me. But also, Mike talks about Ruocchio's writing style. And the older I get, the more I value someone who is very skilled with the pen, the wordsmiths. The less I enjoy the journalistic type of prose that I may have enjoyed a little bit more 20, 30 years ago. But I do enjoy those writers that can simply just flat out write and have the power of the word, the power of the metaphor, and just are able to string sentences and paragraphs and chapters together in such an artful manner. So that really, really appeals to me. And as I mentioned, there are certain booktubers that tastes align. With Mike, I would say probably 80% of what we read, I think we both agree. So that's a pretty high percentage rate of booktubers, that the things that I like, that they like. So his recommendation is big. But recently I've seen a lot of other people start this series and just rave about it. So Ruocchio is number 1 on my list of authors that I think I'm going to love. I will most likely start this later this year. I have the first 3 books already, but I think this is a series where I'm probably going to want to read all the novellas and short stories. So I may start this later this year and just maybe string it out over quite some time so that maybe I can just finish up when the last book is published. But I am excited to sometime start reading Christopher Ruocchio. Now, the second author on this list is on for a very different kind of reason. The second author is Tad Williams. I have his first book of his Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn series called The Dragonbone Chair. Tad Williams is often considered one of the authors that's kind of the bridge between classic fantasy and modern fantasy. you generally hear his name alongside Robert Jordan's and a couple others that were kind of right in the midst of that, where they were still embracing a lot of the classic fantasy elements, but telling more modern stories. And Tad Williams has also written some science fiction and maybe a little bit more. If you don't know this author, there's a great video on Bridger's channel, The Library Ladder, about Tad Williams. Go watch that one. That got me really excited to read Tad Williams. But I'll tell you what got me excited to read Tad Williams the most are his detractors. So hear me out. The one thing I hear most about Tad Williams when people talk about they don't like it is it's so slow. And every time I hear that, I turn into that SNL character, Dana Carvey. He was like an old grandpa or something, and just complaining about today's youth. And I feel like that old grandpa. I feel like, will you stop with the short attention spans? Fast-paced does not equal good, especially in the fantasy genre. Give me a choice between a slow-paced read and a fast-paced read in that genre. I'm going to take that slow burn every time. I think all this started with the remote control. I'm old enough to remember just barely having to get up and walk to the TV console, because that's what it was. It was a big console. And having to turn the channel to one of our 3 channels or 4 channels we might have had at the time. But nowadays, we have short attention spans. Flip, 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 flip. Anyway, they say this is slow. I'm all about that. People say the same thing about Robin Hobb, and maybe the plot's slow, but there's so much else going on. And I love it. Robin Hobb, of course, is my favorite fantasy author. So I am excited to read Tad Williams. And thank you, detractors, because you've made me want to read him more than even the people that love this author. So third author on this list is an author that I've only heard one booktuber ever talk about. That booktuber is Brian Lee Durfee. The author is James A. Michener. James Michener is an author of historical fiction and literally epic length historical fiction. I discovered a love for epic length historical fiction probably 15, 20 years ago when I first read Pillars of the Earth by Ken Follett. Since read all of those. I'm in the midst of reading the Asian Saga of James Clavell right now, and those are some big chunky boys. I've read some big standalones like Lonesome Dove. I'm going to be reading The Baroque Cycle by Neil Stephenson later this year. Well, Michener's brand of epic length historical fiction sounds very intriguing to me. A lot of these books, what they do is they take an area and they tell the story of that area over the span of hundreds, if not thousands of years. The one I always see in the bookstore here in Austin, Texas is the one called Texas, so that's probably the first one I'll read. But I've heard great things about Alaska. He's written one based on the Chesapeake. He's written one based on Japan. And this just seems like an author that I am really going to enjoy. So I can't wait to read some James A. Michener. Fourth author on this list has 2 names, kind of, and that is Daniel Abraham / James S.A. Corey. If you didn't know, James S.A. Corey is the pseudonym of when Daniel Abraham writes with Ty Frank. And when they write together, they primarily have written the Expanse series, which is it's 9 or 11. It's 9 or 11 books. It's a high number of odd books. Anyway, it's a space opera that is apparently really, really good. I hear a lot of people raving about that space opera. It had a television show that I didn't watch yet because I want to read the books first, but it's a series I've wanted to read for quite some time, and it is finished now, so I'm very excited to read that at some point. I hear just so many people rave about it. But even more so, Daniel Abraham by himself has written a series called The Long Price Quartet, which probably a lot of the viewers of my channel are viewers of Alan's channel, and he's been known as the Long Price Prophet, and has been raving about this series for years. And his recommendation obviously carries a lot of weight with me because in addition to fantasy, he likes a lot of the historical fiction that I do as well. But also, when I see that he's been getting other people to read it, pretty much everybody has been loving this series. And one thing that very much appeals to me with Long Price Quartet is it mimics some of the things that I really loved about Realm of the Elderlings. Specifically seeing characters at various stages of their life. In the Realm of the Elderlings, we saw Fitz from a small boy all the way to an old man. And apparently this series does that as well in kind of some concise storytelling. And I'm really excited to read that. My schedule's a bit full this year, so it probably won't be this year, but I look forward to reading that next year. But I think that Daniel Abraham is going to be one of those authors that I love. So the last author on this list is an author that, frankly, I'm not in a hurry to read, but frankly, he's not in a hurry to write, and that's Patrick Rothfuss. Now, Rothfuss is probably the most divisive author of the 5 on this list. I see people that love him. I see people that hate him. I see people that think he's just okay and a bit overrated. Honestly, I do think some of his detractors are probably detractors more about him as a person, or, that's harsh, more of maybe some of the actions and things that he's done. People might not like him because of that. But what I've heard about Name of the Wind are some things that I think I will really enjoy. I've heard that as a writer, just he is skilled and he is poetic, and he just seems like a kind of author that you can just like sink your teeth into his prose. When I hear people talk about his writing skill, that is important to me. For people that that's not important, that's a different part of his craft that may not be important to you, but it is important to me. I've also heard that his use of music is quite brilliant in this series, and as a musician, I'm always curious to see how that's handled with various authors, because frankly, I see it done more wrong than right. So I'm interested in that. But it just seems like Name of the Wind is just a book that just people keep coming back to. It seems like it has a new special edition every 6 months, so there's a lot of love for this book. Again, I'm not in a hurry. The first 2 books of his trilogy are out. The second book seems to be a lot more middling ratings than the first book, and the third book, people don't even know if he's even writing at any point right now. So I'm not sure when I will get to this, but I suspect that Rothfuss is going to be an author for me. Well, those are the 5 authors that I think are going to be authors for me, that I think that I'll love. Longtime viewers, if you have any authors you think that I would love, I'd love to hear those recommendations. I'd love to explore people that you think would be something that's right up my alley and my taste. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. You can also find me on Twitter, Goodreads, and the Fireside Discord. Links in the description below. As always, thank you for watching. Until next time, goodbye.